Hello, I'm Sarah Lister from Sheffield Digital, and today I'm talking to Mohamed Said, who is a freelance digital product designer. How do you usually find work?
So I have managed to attend a bunch of events over the past few years. I think events are super underrated, especially with the pandemic. We seem to be still in it, but sort of the best part of it past us. We've sort of missed that interaction, that one-on-one interaction, and sort of learning people, conferences, meetups. And then the one that I really highly recommend is hackathons. All of these have one thing in common, which is you get to see people from all types of backgrounds, and you get to learn from them, you get to listen. And if you're very lucky, you might have the opportunity to even have a conversation with one or two of them. And I'll just go back to saying why I think hackathons are really good. Hackathons are really good because as a novice, someone new, you get to really understand the process of whether it's designing for me or developing for another person, how that actually works in a very micro and small process, as you would in a workplace where it would be sort of fully blown and you'd be working on projects and so on. You also get to learn new people, people that were never exposed to you, and they're free to go to. So you don't have to pay anything, you don't have to convince anyone or network. You just have to show up with a sort of an open mind and then just get on with it. So that's how I found my first bit of work. To answer the question, I met a really nice group of developers and business guys in tech, and I got a 2-week opportunity to work with a local agency, and I will name drop them. They're called Hive IT. They're a really good agency, and that was a really good opportunity for me to sort of open my eyes and sort of learn about the world of tech, design, development, and so on.
Brilliant. And the hackathon events and other events, are they usually in Sheffield or in the region?
So yeah, there is a few in Sheffield. If you go to websites such as Meetup or Eventbrite or any of those sort of event spaces, you can research hackathons. There is also established ones like Startup Weekend, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's also ones like TechCrunch Disrupt, which is really good as well. But yeah, you can really just Google search it and try and go on some of these event websites, and you can quickly sort of find hackathons to go to.
And would you say that you need to be a developer to go to such events?
I don't think so. I think as long as you have an open mind, if you're a new designer or a new developer, and you don't feel as though you have enough knowledge, just go. And just you being around developers and designers will give you a lot. And you can obviously take knowledge from them. You can listen in terms of the conversations they're having. You can even just sit behind them as they're sort of coding and learn how are they putting this project together. And there is often lots of work to do over 48-hour hackathon, whether it's designing a page or thinking of the idea and brainstorming. It's really just about your mindset, and as long as you bring a good one, you should do well.
So what do you actually do as a digital product designer?
So the way I look at it is there's various steps within building a digital product. There is what I like to call research. So you get to find out a bit about a digital space or service. And then you start to design it, put it together and sort of prototype it. Then there's development of it, which is often where web developers get involved. And then there is the sort of what I call post sort of design development, which is sort of getting it out to the market, showing it to people, and eventually to your end user. I like to sit right where it's sort of the design part of it, and a little bit of research sometimes. So that means I have to go and speak to people that are using the existing service or so on, and try to find out about what's working, what's not. And then that informs me to sort of go ahead and start designing websites, apps. Even now I'm doing some digital services. So I think research and design is sort of where I sort of have my disciplines. Yeah.
And how do you usually do the research side of things? Do you do surveys, or do you have like one-to-one chats, or a mixture of things?
Yeah, I think second is sort of a mixture of things. It sort of depends on the project and sort of what the scope of work is. So if you're working, for example, if you're working with the NHS, there's quite a big scope of people you have to work with. So you may have to do a lot of research with different groups of people. So maybe looking at personas and designing personas and the types of people that would interact with a given page or design or sort of a app, even in some cases. Some are very specific. You know, it could be a local charity that has a specific user group, and therefore you may have to do a bit of user testing, which is just simply getting on a call like this and asking them questions and listening to their feedback, trying to not talk a lot and just taking as much information. And from there onwards, you can really acquire a rich sense of feedback that you can really inform you in later stages of the product cycle.
Mm-hmm. Are there any courses or experiences that you think are particularly important for this type of freelance work?
Yeah, I really think that learning, development, acquiring more knowledge is an ongoing thing. I think every year you have to be learning about your trade. Specific to design, I think there's really good courses that Google publish. I think LinkedIn Learning has some really good courses as well. I think there's platforms like Udemy and so on. There's even now product schools. I think there's one called Product School where you can learn a bit about product design and so on. But majority of it, and the way I learn, is actually working on projects. So I think you can do a bit of theory work, you can read, try to prepare yourself so that when a project comes about, you sort of have a knowledge in terms of how you want to attend it. Maybe it's a user researching session, so you can do a bit of Google research and put together your notes and go ahead. But learning on the job is something that I've had to do, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But everyone's different. I think you need to find your own way of learning, and as soon as you do that, I think you'll excel.
And did you transfer your skills from an employed position into the freelance work that you do now, or have you learned this independently?
So I learned a lot of my skills independently. Often when you start off, I think for most tech jobs, you're sort of in a catch-22, which is a lot of the employers want you to have experience. And in order to get that experience, you need to have a job, or you need to have some sort of place you work at. So you're constantly at the beginning in that limbo. So one of the things I did was I worked for free. It was quite controversial for me because I wasn't getting paid at the end of it, but it sort of was a seed or an investment. I did projects for my local barbershop. I did projects for local fast food companies, and I was able to demonstrate that on my website, and employers picked that up and they thought, that's really good, we'll give you a job. And now it's gone on a bit. So now freelance opportunities, when they look at my website, they see other jobs, other work that I've been working on. So at the beginning, it's quite tough. But once you sort of break into the industry and people recognize your name or even your work, which is better, you can really excel and go from there.
So when you did those first few projects, were you doing those alongside a job where you were being paid, or did you just focus on building up your portfolio?
Yeah, so I actually had a job at the time. Um, Unlike many, I actually did a degree in marketing, which is nothing to do with tech. It's in the world of business. And I was actually struggling to even get a marketing job after my degree. So I did an administrative role. I worked at the Home Office. So from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'd be working in my admin job. And then from 6 all the way until I fell asleep, I'll be trying to work on projects and side projects. Thankfully, I don't have to do that anymore. I can take a bit of time off after work. But yeah, I think like I said previously, it's sort of taking those initial steps are very difficult. It's a very competitive industry. So it's never easy to sort of get a job straight away. But I think everything is sort of based on reference. It doesn't even matter even if you don't have a degree or you don't have a background in this industry, but most employers or businesses are looking for people with some sort of competence and a bit of experience.
So it sounds like you worked really hard to get to where you are now. What was the driving force behind that? Why did you want to get to a position where you could just freelance?
I've been told no a lot throughout my career. I think everyone sort of deals with their own sort of career development differently. I've often took those no's as sort of they don't know what they're talking about, and I'm going to go ahead and sort of show them that I am capable of said job or whatever. In my case, it was product design. It's something that I wanted to do. I would apply to jobs and it wasn't successful, but I said to myself, I've got to achieve this goal of becoming a product designer. So on a personal note, it was sort of proving to others that I was capable of becoming a product designer.
What types of product design really spark your interest?
I really love service-based product designers. And what I mean by this is people who design for example, for government services, booking apps, and so on. And the reason for that is because they're pretty much all the same. If you think about trying to book a flight ticket, there's not much to work with there, but the best companies seem to figure out a way to keep you coming back. And that's really what's interesting to me. So what's the psychology behind that? What research informed them to make their decisions? How are they influencing users? And a whole bunch of other questions that come to mind. But it's really designers that have limited scope of work in terms of what is possible, but yet they still manage to excel where others sort of just find it hard. Yeah, I think a really good company that comes to mind is Domino's. Now, if you think of it, ordering fast food has, especially throughout the pandemic, has been extremely consolidated to 2 or 3 apps on our phone. Domino's is one of the companies that sort of made an investment early on, and now we order through their own sort of channels. And even though they might be offered a pizza or another app, we still go back to them because of the user experience they've put together. But that's just one example of many companies that are really, really interesting case studies. Yeah. I think if you are interested in user experience design or product design, I think now is a really good time, because a lot of companies are now looking at their businesses and their offerings and realizing how much of a impact good design can have on their service. So even if you go on LinkedIn, and you'll see a lot of product design and user experience jobs, because it's so important, and it's becoming important in all types of industries, whether it's in education or private sector. And when I say private sector, there's so many sectors you can think of. So really, if you're interested in product design, really invest, because we're going through a really good time for digital product designers.
How many projects do you typically work on at the same time?
I typically work on 2 to 3 projects per month. I usually try and finish a project within about a 14-day period. So that can be very difficult, because a lot of it is based on the client and their urgency. If you have a client that's not communicating as good, it can be quite difficult to sort of get them to accept a project or a scope of work. Having said that, a lot of clients do like that sort of time frame, and that's sort of the time frame that's worked for me personally. So 2 to 3.
Okay, brilliant. And do you plan your future work or projects well in advance of others coming to an end?
I've never heard of a freelancer who can plan, much into that. It's sort of what you have. You can, if you get inquiries, you can say, hey, I'm busy for the next 2 months. Can we start on said month? And if you're lucky, they'll be there, and you can start work. But what I do try and do is be super honest with clients, because that goes a long way in trying to win their business. If you tell them I'm working on work, on projects, and I've got to really prioritize the work I have on hand, it's really good for the client and for their business as well, for them to just plan ahead.
And if you have a bit of a gap, then do you tend to be really proactive in finding more work, or do you kind of just back off a bit and take a bit of time out usually?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, a question I often hear is, what do freelancers do if they don't have enough work? And like financially, even from a financial perspective, or even from a productive perspective. For me, I often do charge for those times that I'm not working. There is a set amount of buffer zone to cover me through the next project. Obviously, that is for a set time. As for productivity and trying to make sure that I'm developing, this is a great time for you to sort of upskill and look at new industries and new things are working. One of the things I've worked on over the past 7 months is workshops, digital workshops. So I'm really glad I've worked with 2 really great organizations, and I've facilitated workshops for them. This is very much based on sort of the design sprint methodology. Design Sprint is a really good book. It's a highly recommended book. And it's really good to sort of do like a workshop with them and allow them to sort of, and it's also great for me to sort of find a new skill in facilitating workshops and so on. So I'll dance.
And is that paid work?
Yes, that's paid work, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, obviously the way you package that is completely different to how you do a digital project, but it is paid work. It's actually very, very, for me, it's been extremely rewarding from a lot of sense, because I've managed to stay within those 2 weeks. So I'm not spending more weeks on workshops. It's also allowed me to use skills like what I'm doing now, which is talking and being in front of people, which was never easy for me and still not easy for me. And then also it's been really good in sort of having a clear sort of way of thinking. Because when you have 30 or even 20 people in front of you, and they're literally waiting for you to give them instructions or facilitate a workshop, you can't have much time to mumble or sort of think of ideas or try to be creative. You have to have a real plan before you go in.
Is there anything that you found challenging since you started freelancing?
Oh, the list is endless. Financially, I've made so many, I can't even explain. Like, I've sent the wrong invoices, I've sent the wrong amount, I've sent invoices to one client when it should have gone to the other. I've had invoices not being paid for 60 days or more. Yeah, lots of, but each of those are sort of lessons that you sort of learn and you sort of go through. I haven't really had a huge amount of challenge in terms of finding clients. Actually, a lot of my clients have been referrals. So they've been referrals, them saying, you know, you've done a good job. I would like to refer you to a friend of mine who's doing said work. Can you have a chat with him or her? And it would be really good to sort of go from there. Another challenge has just been, when it gets busy, how do you stay focused? One client may be sort of finishing up and they just need you to touch up on some work, whilst another one is really needing a lot of attention because they're starting and there's lots of stakeholders involved and so on. So having sort of a clear thought in terms of knowing exactly where you are with each project, not taking too much work on, but not taking little so that you're not being challenged, is another one. But I'm sure you can ask several freelancers and it's wide ranging in nature. I think a lot of those lessons were very early on. I think when you work for an employer, you're just used to things being handled by your employer. But when you're a freelancer, all of that burden has to come on you. You have to go and find an accountant. You have to go and make sure that you're following taxes and so on. Make sure you have a separate bank account that is different to your personal one, and you're on top of that. Make sure you're pricing your work well. Otherwise, you're going to be out of business very quickly. And then also another thing that I've learned very recently is you really got to know who your clientele is, and try and bring conversations to a close very, very quickly if you don't think they meet that criteria. So there's no point in speaking to a said business for weeks and weeks trying to prospect them, but you kind of knew in the back of your head that they could never afford your work to begin with. Or in the other case, they're just too much of a big client that you just couldn't take on that amount of work as just a single person. So yeah, there's lots of advice that I think you can have over a long conversation, but yeah, I'll leave it to that.
Okay, brilliant. How would you describe your experience of working with Sheffield-based companies as your clients?
I'm born and bred in Sheffield. I'm going to be a bit biased. I think it's a really, really good place to live and work. It's an outdoor city. It's really friendly people here. There's 2 huge universities here, 2 great football clubs here. It's got a really good culture. And then most importantly, I think it's got a really good tech sector that is growing. We're not as big as the other cities, but it's getting bigger as time goes on. Lots of companies are coming online here. And if you're a developer, a designer, these are the only 2 that come to head right now, but I'm sure there's user researchers, there's quality assurance people, there is project managers, product designers. There's lots and lots of opportunities. As to my experience with them, I've worked with several businesses based in Sheffield, and all of them have been really good. Even the ones that I've sort of struggled in getting the project over the line, they've been very helpful. And I think also having a really good personal relationship has been very good. Obviously it's a professional setting, but that sort of back and forth, sort of keeping up to date in terms of how things are progressing, is really, really important.
How do you manage getting paid?
Currently it's the normal sort of setup. I have been looking into this, getting paid better or getting paid quicker. Sort of questions have been looming. But I send an invoice to a client, and they sort of run it through payroll or whatever the service they have, and I would get paid over a set agreed time. So it was a 30-day scheme, I'll get paid over 30 days and so on. There's lots of caveats to this. Obviously, a lot of companies find it difficult to pay on time. As a freelancer, it can be very impactful if a company doesn't pay on time, and just because you have running costs, you have other expenses that you have to take care of. So it's very important that you sort of have a very tough love conversation with your clients as to your sort of payment terms. I didn't have a lot of these in the beginning, but it's very important that you sort of take those on. So, yeah.
Okay. And finally, you've already given so many amazing tips, but is there any one tip that you would give to people just starting out as a freelance product designer in the Sheffield City region?
The one tip I would give is go for it. It's very simple. I'm sure you've heard it lots of times, but it's really the best thing you can do right now is getting after your product design career, your job opportunities. I can tell you it was not easy for me, and I haven't heard of a single product designer, not the ones I've met, who said it was easy for them. But you should definitely go for it. And there's lots of companies in Sheffield. In fact, one of the first places I would recommend is Sheffield Digital. There's lots of opportunities there, freelance gigs, agencies that are recruiting, but just go for it and you should do well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.